I feel like the uncertainty is one of the toughest parts of being a farmer today because, you're trying to plan, we're thinking about the crop that we're going to plant next year, but we're also thinking about generations coming into the business, or depending on your financials, how you're going to maintain where you are, let alone try to grow that. What is your biggest challenge when you look forward for your own operation to make it viable for the next generation?
Politics. I mean, I can dive into that, but I mean, really, it's politics. I think politics or regulation. It's one of the two, and regulation is a result of politics. But
Exactly.
that is we can figure out how to get this stuff done, but not if it really doesn't even make sense anymore. And I don't know if you guys ever read Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
I don't know what chapter we're in Atlas Shrugged, but I feel like, I mean, that's the world we're living in, and where the disconnect continues, or the gap between reality and
what the world is actually like.
Yes, is getting just broader and broader. And so it just gets, I don't know how hard. I mean, I'm only 42, but sometimes I feel so freaking exhausted. I'm like, this is not worth it. Like you get the payroll audit, and then you get the OSHA audit, and then you do 13 food safety audits. And then you have some troll on the internet tell you that you're a slave driver because you're employing workers from Mexico and you're putting them in free housing. And you're like, this may not be worth it. And I hope when I say this, that the people that are listening to you, that those that aren't farmers understand this. This is, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but like I could either scream or cry sitting here right now, because that's how true it is. It is overwhelming. It's already risky. We're already in a super, super volatile business. We already work on super thin margins. We all have to borrow a ton of money. And at the same time, you want to make our job harder and harder and harder. And then on top of that, you want to tell us that we suck and that we're ruining the environment and that we don't care about our workers and that we don't care about anything.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And I just want to be like, forget it. You guys figure out how to feed yourselves. I know how to feed myself.
Right.
I know how to live. You guys figure it out.
All of the food we eat and much of the clothing we wear comes from plants and animals that are raised on farms. Farms are different in type, in size, and even in name.
Welcome to Barn Talk. Today, we're going to do our best not to cry. The guest that we have has many layers, and we're gonna peel them back for you. If Donkey was here, he'd say, that'll do. No more cringy onion jokes. So our guest today is a produce farmer, but he's really become an advocate for just about all aspects of farming here in the United States. He has a huge following on just about all social media platforms, and we are super excited to have him here today.
But first, before we get into that, guys, pay the fee. If you get any value from the show, you guys know the ticket to admission to watch or listen to the show is paying the fee. Share it out with your friends, family, coworkers, employees, whoever. We're trying to do some good in this world, grow this thing, and we don't run ads to promote the show. It's just all through you guys, through organic growth. So we really appreciate everybody that does that. Also, leave us a review on Spotify and Apple, and we see everybody that's been doing that. It helps us out a lot too. So we really appreciate all you guys, and let's get into the show.
Welcome to Barn Talk, Shay Myers. It is a pleasure to have you.
Not a desert here, and farmland like I can't even imagine. I mean, as far as no pivots, no irrigation, you live in a special place.
So a good place to start is tell us a little bit about you and your business, and we'll go down that
How
road.
You grew up, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Just give a little background.
I live in a small town called Nissa, Oregon. That's where the farming operation started with my grandfather. He after the Korean War, he came back and got some GI Bill money. Started actually with chickens, which was a complete disaster for him. But it took him another 20 years to where he was able to get on his own, and he started farming on his own in the late 1970s. And the farm is on my mom's side of the family. So there's 8, if I count this right, I think there's 8 different families now. I've got my grandmother who's still actively involved at 90 years old in our farming operation. and who has been an integral part of, obviously, as a partner with my grandfather from the beginning. I've got my uncle, Craig, my mom, and then there's myself, a cousin, Chase, two cousins-in-law, and a brother-in-law.
Wow.
So there's 8 separate families, and we have more that just came back. I have Madison that just came back in a sales position, and my little sister working her way back. So you could say there's even 10 family members, right? Potentially separate families that are part of our operation. We're a vertically integrated farming operation. We do everything from asparagus to watermelon. Works out nice. I need a Z. We need to do zucchini or something so I can go A to Z. 8 or 9 crops typically in our rotation. We farm 4,000 acres, and the core of what we grow, like most of our gross income comes from onions. Probably 75 to 85%, depending on the year, is based on onion production. We farm about 1,200 acres of onions. We market as part of our operation in that vertical integration. So we grow onions, we pack onions, we process onions, and we market onions. And we market onions our own, obviously, and then for other farmers in multiple locations throughout the country. And so we end up marketing about 2,000 acres worth of onions, somewhere in the realm of 2.2 million bags or something a year.
Wow. That's awesome.
But we work together as best we can. There's only 2 of you, right?
I just was sitting here thinking, okay, do you have some people would want to have a lawyer on retainer with that much family. Do you have like a counselor on retainer?
We should have. We should have.
Need a mediator to sit at the table.
It's really hard. It's different. Everyone has different ways that they approach things.
Yep.
I think generation 1, and I'm almost generation 2 because I'm the oldest by like a decade or even a decade and a half, 15 years between me and the youngest. And you can definitely see the generational shifts in mindset and just the way that we approach things. So it has made it certain assumptions that you make based on the way you grow up or your understanding, you see that they're incorrect, right? As reality starts to actually form in front of you.
So before we get in any further, I just wanted to say, where can people find you on social? All your links.
You can find me all over. Probably the most obvious one is TikTok. Shay at Shay Farm Kid. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's Shay F. Myers and Owyhee Produce there. And Instagram is the same handle, Shay Farm Kid.
Tell us a little bit about. I saw one of your TikToks and it said, you said when you were growing up that you didn't really want to be a farmer. What changed your mind on that? You said it was legacy, but like, what were you gonna do? And then how did you transition to become what you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know that it's that good of a story, but the only reason I didn't want to be, okay, so first of all, farming is a really, really special industry. It's a really special thing to work in. It's really something that I feel like we should and can be proud of. And I grew up with that mentality. Like I loved going about my life and being part of the farming operation. Where I struggled is in communicating to people, which is kind of what's led to my social media channels, communicating to people what farming really is instead of what they think it is. The big barn with 3 cows in front and the chickens run in the yard. The pitchfork and the overalls and, the straw in your mouth. I mean, that's really what people picture when they picture agriculture. And so I struggled with that, probably. The fact that I didn't want to be thought of as that type of person. I also, mechanically, you don't want me to fix anything. So if you make me be an operator and I mean an equipment operator or a farm manager, I'm not going to be very happy. So I knew that I couldn't do that. And that's another reason I didn't want to be a farmer. But when it came to the legacy, my grandfather had always, like his goal, like his BHAG, right? His big, hairy, audacious goal for himself was to have multiple generations back on the farm. And I was getting to a point where I was the first, not the oldest in the 3rd generation, but pretty close, the first one that really had a chance to come back. And I could either be a pilot, commercial pilot, which I'm fortunate to be able to fly. I still get to fly the airplane around and go visit customers and do that kind of thing. But I wanted to be a commercial pilot. But at that point in time, it wasn't like today at all. In fact, it was the exact opposite. You had to plan on making 19 or 20 grand for the first 5 to 6, 7 years.
Wow.
And you were going to have $250,000 in debt paying for your training. So it just didn't make any sense. I'm like, I've just got to figure out how to make enough and be successful enough so that I can fly an airplane as a hobby or as part of my business and not be a pilot, because it just didn't make sense. So that was, what kind of prevented me from being a pilot. And then that effort that my grandfather had made and that dream that he had, I'm like, I've got a chance where I can contribute. Like, I don't have to go back and drive a tractor.
Yep.
I don't have to go back and manage a farm specifically. I can come back and run this as a business. I've always loved looking at businesses from an entrepreneurial standpoint and looking at, okay, what can I do that will help us stand out, that'll help us grow, that will help us, or that would help us be successful from a business standpoint. And that was lacking in the aspect that, not that my grandfather wasn't a good businessman, not that my uncle wasn't a good businessman, not even my mom was running our asparagus operations at that point, not that she was bad either, but they were dedicated. Their time was farming. That's what they had to do.
Yeah.
And by allowing me to come back and my family taking a significant risk on allowing me to take some of these vertical integrations and with the onion packing facility, I was able to kind of put in practice some of the things that they weren't able to, because they gave me the time and allowed me to make the mistakes. And that's where I ended up where I am.
Yeah. So would you say, like, that generation, they viewed what you did, like truly viewed that farming, you raised a commodity and you looked at it? I feel like a lot of that generation didn't realize that there was a way that you could set yourself aside, and we got into like brand. You could become a brand. And that's kind of, our industry is the same way, in that a lot of people, I think we're just getting started of people realizing that, yes, we all make a product and that product's very similar, but how you do it and how you market it and the way you do things, there's value there if you can show it to people. And what did they think? Like, obviously they must have been receptive to that idea. How did that all transition?
Yeah. So so typically what happens in our area, what you did 2 decades ago, is you would grow an onion crop. So you could kind of think of it like even a corn or a soy crop, and you're going to deliver it to to be put away and dried and sent off or whatever, or to somebody who's going to buy it for feed. You grew the onion as a commodity. You delivered those onions to a custom packer, and a custom packer would pack them and market them for you. And it wasn't so much that, well, and first of all, I guess it's important to qualify that even those that were selling it as a commodity. 20, 30 years ago, you, even as a packer, you would receive those onions in. So the farmer would deliver the onions to you, put them in a bag, and then you put them on a rail car, and then you'd send them to what are called terminal markets. New York has a terminal market. Boston has a terminal market. LA, like all the major cities would have what is considered a terminal market. And basically, it's a place where you would deliver the produce, and then there would be smaller produce distributors in those areas that would offload those cars and market for you. And so you still didn't even know what the price was going to be. But as technology has improved and the ability to pick up the phone and talk to someone, I mean, it started really with fax machines, but now I can, even when I started, to send a digital picture 18, 20 years ago was a pretty significant undertaking. People don't realize. And now you just take a picture and you send it to somebody so they can see what they're buying. But you had to deliver the commodity somewhere, and boom, that was it. And yes, they saw the vision of taking it one step further from the field to the packing shed. I don't think any of us realized what we could do from a branding standpoint until 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. And what we were like, we got to figure out how to carve some space where we stand out, where we talk about what's different about what we do. And a lot of the times it's not that it's different. It's just that we're just talking about what we actually do, and the other people just do what they do and they don't tell anyone.
So is that the driving force to why you got on social media? I know you touched earlier that it was to portray that we aren't these, dumb farmers with hay in our mouth sitting in the field with a pitchfork, but is it also to get your brand out there and show who you are behind the farm, behind your brand?
Sure. It's definitely both. I think, so when I first started, I started on LinkedIn. And I still have a decent following on LinkedIn, and that's probably one of my favorite channels. For anybody that's not on LinkedIn, the quality of interaction and the commentary and the networking that's available on LinkedIn, plug for them because it's a great channel. That's probably my favorite place to go read comments and to actually communicate with people. But I started there, but I started with the minutia. Like I thought people, what they needed, I wanted to be, so Grant Cardone, like if you go back to, I'm trying to think of what one of his earlier books was, but he wanted you to be like the expert, right? He wanted you to be the expert of your industry. And that's the way that I went about it. And I was the onion expert. In fact, if you go back and follow some of my stuff, you'll find that I was going to be the onion expert.
Yep.
But I was doing the minutia. I was like, okay, well, this is how many layers an onion has, and this is the type of internal decay to watch for, and this is how you extend your shelf life, and all of these things that would matter to an onion buyer, but not to anyone else.
Not to anybody seeing an onion.
Not to anybody seeing an onion, and what as it turns out, not even to a lot of the onion buyers, because they didn't know anything. And that's, I mean, I tell the story of the onion tree, right? I mean, that's a real conversation that I had over dinner in Phoenix, Arizona, 10, 12 years ago. And I was talking to an onion buyer about onions and flipping through and showing him pictures of the process. And he's like, well, what's the tree look like that the onion's growing? And that was the moment where I'm like, whoa, I gotta dumb this stuff down. Like I've gotta get, I'm trying to talk it 3 inches and I need to get to 30,000 feet. I gotta get way higher.
Yeah.
And that was really a significant transformation in the way that our brand changed and developed, because we were, I mean, not that I wouldn't talk about specifics, but way fewer specifics than what I started with.
You had an idea of what you just assumed that everybody knew. And
Exactly.
you realized that, nope, there's a lot that nobody knows that I need to back up.
Right. I think is a problem we have in agriculture in general. Like we assume that the consumer understands so much more about what we do and why we do it and how we do it and the reasoning behind all these things that we're doing, and they really don't. And it's not their fault. We live this every single day.
I was going to say, I think it's every advocate out there goes through this stage of starting, and they're giving out this content that's really in depth and like, well, not really in depth. It's not. It's kind of broad, and it's like you are been a part of the industry for a while, and then people are like, well, what's this mean? And what's this mean? And then what's this mean? And then you're like, oh man, it's like that progression. It's like, oh man, we can really talk about anything. Like we can talk about a sorting board because people don't even know what a sorting board is and what it's used for, you know?
I'm sure that you're no different. One thing that always, it was an aha moment for us is that the things that people really latch on to are the stuff that we don't spend enough time on, because to us, it's just so monotonous. It's what we, the little things we do every single day that we don't give a second thought to. People literally are like, why is that color? Or why do you use whatever, like a sorting board?
Why are your gates blue?
Yeah.
And they don't realize, the pigs like blue gates. They can move better with blue gates. So it's like that kind of stuff is just crazy. But yeah, that's interesting. So when you were going through like what your family was doing, and they were, really focused on the farming, and they were operators on that side. And what's your current role at the business now? So would you say you're the CEO? You're like the business operator of
I'm the business operator. I'm the CEO of Hawaii Produce. We have a farming operation as well. But everything's really connected. When we do our financials, we blend everything together because we don't want to, separate. I mean, especially with all these family members involved, it's really important for us to bring everything together and say, like as a group, cohesively, this is what we're earning and this is what our financial return is, so that we don't lose our focus or way.
Because at the end, all the pieces matter to get to the end of profitability.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's other pieces that are going to contribute, but if we don't have onions at the packing shed, we don't make any money at the packing shed, and we certainly don't have anything to market as a marketing company. So it all connects.
I'd say you're probably an expert in doing family business. So can you give any tips out there for family businesses and when they sit down at that table and they need to talk some shit through? Like, what tips can you give to?
That is loaded.
Yeah. What tips could you give to family businesses?
We're experts at failing. However, I can give some really, really important advice that we, generation 1 through 3, we all agree with. And that is, when you make a decision, first of all, it needs to be written down. Because the way that I remember something versus someone else, and we're talking people that you'll trust your life with, the way that you both remember a conversation from 10 years ago is completely different.
Yes.
and what your expectations are for sweat equity, for example, for the younger generations, what your expectations are and what the other generations want to give you can be two different things. And furthermore, what complicates this even more is sometimes if that contribution is too significant and creates too much growth and too much opportunity, then those that are looking at that contribution feel like they could be giving you too much.
Yeah.
So you need to define to the very best of your ability what you're back for, what your time means, and what that should transfer to in ownership or equity or dollars through that period of time. Because if you don't, what you're expecting as the new guy is not going to be what the older generation is going to give you.
Yeah.
And
Or
then
very
you're unhappy.
seldom. I think it's different. Father and son is different than, right? I'm talking grandmother to grandson or uncle to nephew, right? And now cousins to cousins or cousins to cousins-in-law. Like you're talking about different dynamics.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Different trust levels, different understanding, different work ethics. So that even complicates it more. But I think even in every setting, define, and you can do that. You can sit down and just say, this is what we agree on and this is what it should mean. And then it's written down. And at least then, if you go back and you don't agree because something's changed, you have a starting point.
This problem is only going to grow because the generations in agriculture, there is so much land, so much resources that are all going to have to turn over in the next decade.
You're saying based on the age of the average farmer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And these families, it's so hard. I mean, that's why it's so rare. It is so rare to have any business passed down through multiple generations. There's an old guy that my dad went to country school with that used to stop by here once in a while, and his sons farmed for him, and they bought a new tractor one year, and they didn't tell him. And when he saw him with the new tractor, he raised the rent on all the ground that he had that they were renting. And he told my dad, he's like, it takes 3 generations to make a fortune, only one to piss it away, Lawrence. And he goes, those boys, he goes, if they got enough damn money to buy a new tractor, then they got enough money to pay me a bunch more rent, because I'm not making them a deal just so that they can look cool farming. And it was a big knockdown, drag out. And obviously communication in that family was very poor, but that's just an example of, to them, it made perfect sense.
Meaning the guys that bought the tractor,
Yeah.
because they're like, I'm more efficient, X, Y, Z. Like they've got a justification for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
To him, it was just,
You're trying to look
you're
cool.
just wasting money. You've got too much money. So
with the content, how has that altered your life / business? Has it affected you positively? What have you seen as the ROI of doing it all?
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was a significant financial ROI. I mean, certainly if you make the effort, for me, selling the commodities that I do, I've had lots of doors open. It also helps when you end up at a trade show. There's a lot of people that they recognize you. They're comfortable with you. I mean, we showed up here 15, 20 minutes ago, and we kind of feel like we know each other. You have a feeling for their personality and for the way they interact with people and just the type of person that they are. That breaks some huge barriers down. So if you're in a business to business type of B2B type of operation, that's huge. Other ROIs, I just think as an industry, agriculture has to look at every angle that we're getting attacked from. Nitrogen, carbon emissions, water for us in the West, water use in the West, protein when you're talking about animal production, whether you should even, be consuming, meat products. We're getting attacked from every angle. So I don't know that the ROI is specific to me, but I sure hope that it's a significant contribution to the industry as a whole. Yeah. I'm not out for this for myself. I mean, I want some wins for myself, right, and for my business,
as anybody would. Right.
But I feel like it's a responsibility, and there needs to be more of us speaking up and sharing our story, because we're losing.
Yeah,
our industry, agriculture, is losing.
And I would say it's back to the whole advocate thing. I think every advocate at their core feels the same way. We got to share our story, and it's about sharing the story first versus for our personal gain. That's second.
I think it's curious. because I know we feel this way. Like we did not start this with the idea that, oh, we're going to go out and we're going to advocate for the swine industry and for farming. I say this often that, people say you need to start with the why in mind. We totally didn't start with the why in mind, or our why was different than where we are today.
Okay. But
you wake up one day and you realize as you get into it and you realize that exactly what you said, that we're in trouble. The ag industry is in trouble. And if more of us don't speak up, don't show, it's only going to get worse. And so like that mission kind of found us where we didn't go looking for it. Right. It just found us. And I think, you would
kind of a realization when you start posting, you start looking at the comments, you start reading this stuff, you start reading articles, you start you're in the community, you're in the community with all the other advocates and people that are in ag, and they start posting some vegan in their comments, or somebody was attacking them for the way that they do stuff on their farm. It's just like, you just get more and more passionate about it, and it does kind of just find you.
Can I speak to that for a second? Like, there's something I want to add there, and that's that those of us that are in this and those that might be listening that are thinking about sharing their message, the other thing that we have trouble with in agriculture, and I'm going to pick a specific channel, not to pick on them because the value there is good, but like, My Job Depends on Ag. I don't know if you've seen that. If you haven't, go look that up. It's a Facebook. I'm sure it's on Instagram as well. My Job Depends on Ag, and it's based in the San Joaquin, or the Central Valley of California. And it's meant to promote agriculture, but what ends up happening is, because that channel is meant for farmer to farmer. It's not meant for the consumer. But so often when we create our content, we are trying to justify what we're doing and why we're doing, instead of communicating with, the intent of creating an understanding. Like, we're talking down to people, to put it in simple terms. We're talking down to people and Lord, like, why don't you understand this?
Right.
And not to say, like, my most recent video is exactly that on TikTok, because I was just pissed because it was so straightforward and clear to me, and people couldn't understand it, and I lost it a little bit. But we need to be more specific and purposeful in the way that we communicate and talk to people and let them converse back with us. So those comments that you get frustrated about, at least people are taking the time. Like, a lot of them are genuinely interested about what you're talking about, and you're their source of information. But if you make them feel stupid, they're just going to scroll right past, and you're going to make no impact.
No impact.
No, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So you said you grow onions, watermelons, asparagus. Is there anything else that you guys grow on your farm?
Yeah, asparagus, beans, corn, alfalfa, mint.
Wow.
We have a mint distillery, hemp, sugar beets, corn. Did I say that already?
Yep. Haven't said onions yet, though.
And onions then. Okay. All right. That's 9, which if you add hemp is 9. So yeah. Oh, and the watermelons, which I didn't throw in there either.
Yep.
So in any given year, we're growing between 7 and 9 crops.
What is the one crop that you think has the most potential long-term? Like, you said hemp, and that makes me kind of curious a little bit. Is there anything there for you?
We jumped into the beginning and lost so much money, and it was full of so many terrible people in agriculture. That's another plug for us. But people in ag are good people, and they're honest and they're straightforward. That doesn't mean they don't lose money. That doesn't mean they don't go out of business. But hemp had so much VC money behind it when it started, you couldn't see through the facade. So people would show up with all kinds of, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to put this equipment in. We're going to extract, the CBD using this process. And when it was done, most of that was fake. Yeah. Like, you couldn't, and you just had no way to know, right? It was a new industry anyway. So it's not like you're going to go see their facility in California because they were just building it.
Right.
Just building it. Okay. So, but hemp's got some real viable potential utility for all kinds of things. And certainly it was a suppressed industry for a long time for, I think, plenty of reasons as well. Yep. I don't know how big the potential is, though. And it's certainly not a CBD. It's more for the fiber, if you're going to really look at what can be done there. I mean, it makes great wood product. It makes good, it's a good cotton alternative, as far as textiles are concerned. But I don't play in that with that commodity enough to really feel comfortable, promoting it or pitching it too much. We played in it because we started, and now we're just, I don't know, I want to say we're in that rut. But we started down that path, and we're going to hold on for a minute and see if something develops. Beyond that, it's really like that's, I think, for the type of agriculture that we do, like vegetable and food production for the most part, human food consumption, it's really hard to know where to pivot here, because as labor increases, so we were just looking at our financials. My sister's meeting with a gubernatorial candidate this morning for Oregon. And we looked back at the financials. Our payroll has doubled since 2015. Doubled. That's not that long. No. Okay. And it's not sustainable. And that's the scary part. So what do we do? Onions, it's almost completely automated. We can keep playing in the onion game. Asparagus, 26,000 acres were grown in California just 15 years ago. They're down to 600 acres.
Wow.
They're down to 600 acres because they can't afford to pay the labor versus these other nations.
Yep.
We're really in a place where there's this huge threat. And I know this is digressing from the core of the conversation, but that's why I can't answer it directly, because I wish I knew where to pivot. Yeah. The onions, we're going to super hyper focus there because we know we've invested a lot in infrastructure and in technology, and we have the know-how.
Can be competitive.
And we know we can stay competitive there. But if you look at watermelon and asparagus, we were doing sweet potatoes. We're out of sweet potatoes for the same thing. We couldn't, from a labor standpoint, we just straight up couldn't keep paying the labor. The Western U.S., San Joaquin, like we're like a mini San Joaquin or Central Valley of California. We're all going to continue to struggle in a lot of ways for the next 10 years at least, until we see if there's another angle, and I don't know what it is.
So a better question might be, when you look out, like today, what's your biggest challenge, and what do you think is going to be for your operation and for farmers in your industry? What's going to be that biggest challenge over the next 5 years?
The biggest challenge is going to be straight up consolidation. I think we're going to start seeing, between potatoes and onions, are kind of comparable, significant amounts of consolidation. People are going to start absorbing people because our margins are really thin and thinning, obviously, and economies of scale is the only thing that's left. And I think that's scary for the consumer, because I think that's where ag in general is headed. Yep. But that's absolutely in my area where it's headed, where there were 300 onion growers just probably 10 years ago, and that's below 200 today. Packing operations used to, when you talk about packing, I'm talking about onion packing. That continues to consolidate all the time. And so that's what we're going to see moving forward, is significant consolidation.
I just was thinking about this, for our industry, for the swine industry, we produce a very consistent product very consistently. So on the packing side of it, on the production, or on the food side of it, if you can get employees to do the jobs that you need to do, you repeat that every day, every hour of every day. Your industry, though, is seasonal in the fact that different things are ready to go at different times. It's not a constant, or maybe it is a constant. In other words, is one of the challenge in that, as you talk consolidation, in the fact that your labor needs are elastic, and it's so hard to have people when you need them, but then you can't have them consistently.
No, the real problem is, so first of all, the labor challenge is it's the cost of labor. The availability with adapting to H-2A, the agricultural visa guest worker program, has been pretty effective, but costly. The biggest problem we have is just overproduction. It's okay, because how do you, as a farmer, and it's got to be similar, except for you have constraints, I think, on the packing side. Mm-hmm. You can't oversupply that by too much, or there's nowhere for your product to go. When we look at packing, and I mean onion packing, there's way more capacity than there are growers to supply those packers.
Wow.
So we had a very good year in 2021. Our 2021 season was very good from a pricing standpoint. The crop was a disaster. That's why it was good. Traditionally, what you see is then the next year, I mean, the commodities markets, you see the same thing with corn or soy, then you overproduce. Mm-hmm. And that's what interjects this incredible volatility and makes it hard to maintain your profitability. But the only way to grow, and improve as a farm yourself is to plant more acres. If I've already got a packing facility, then I want to grow more acres to run through that packing facility to lower my overhead.
Yep.
And so it's that. It's the fact that we probably have, in fact, that's probably the simplest way to look at it. We can pack much more than we should be growing, or more than can be consumed in the U.S. And it's got a limited shelf life, so it has to be marketed in that period of time. But we're packing 10 months of the year, so we're going to put stuff just like you would, putting wheat in a silo or something. I mean, we're gonna store onions for 9 or 10 months so we can consistently pull the supply. But there is a point in time when that stops and you start, in a new growing area or with a new crop.
I was just sitting here thinking, is there regulations? Because there's a lot of these online grocery stores are popping up online, and they're shipping produce. They're shipping everything direct to consumer. Has that a thought? Is that thought ever crossed your mind? You have a brand. You're speaking up. You got a person behind what you guys are doing as a business. Has that ever came into your mind as you grow this attention, maybe to do something like that?
It has. And maybe this is just me making excuses. It seems very difficult to get done independently. I think if you look, I think that the online grocery brands will continue to expand. I think Amazon obviously is a great example of that starting point. Walmart's really starting to do that too. But they already have their networks. They're going to buy through
People they always have.
other people because it has to get consolidated. So I guess what I'm trying to say, for me to direct ship onions to you guys, it would cost you too much. I just can't do it. They're too dense and they're too heavy. Now, if you want to buy a bottle of our mint oil or something, then no problem, right? I mean, I can put that in the mail in a regular envelope and get it here for $3, and then that makes sense. But when it comes to onions, heaven forbid trying to ship a watermelon, right?
Right.
Asparagus, the shelf life. I mean, it's hard on those items to get it done. Now, I think if you look at the guys that are doing it with, I see it on the beef side, guys that are butchering their own or getting their own cattle butchered and then selling that direct to consumer. Yeah, I think there's places where that makes sense. Although I don't know how much more costly that is than somebody walking into the grocery store.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe one of these companies could partner with you because you are like. If I'm going to buy onions from somebody, I would rather buy onions from you because it's just like you said, when you walked in this barn, it felt like we kind of knew each other. And I feel like everybody that watches you kind of knows, well, this isn't the onion farmer that I know. This is the face when I think of onions. This is who I think of. And I think packers in the meat business would be smart to do the same thing. If they saw what we were doing, or if, they saw what cattle guys were doing and had these brands, they should partner with them.
Why don't they? Because I totally agree. Why
I
don't
sit here and
retailers
ask that
come to
question
me
too,
and try and partner with me for the same thing, just to tell the story so that the consumer can actually see the brand or the farmer that's putting those onions in the store. But in our industry, we're seeing the opposite, right? They're removing all branding. Like if you go into, not to name the brands, but if you go in a grocery store, they want their store brand on their onions. They don't want any connection back to the farmer, because that allows them to buy as cheaply as they can that onion as a commodity, and then another of whatever their justifications are for it. I feel like there's way more value in telling the story,
100%.
and we need that. But there's some. What's the fear?
We've talked about this a lot on the meat side. Part of it is our industry on the processing side. They're getting hit just like we are with, people are worried about the water because it takes an awful lot of water to process meat of any kind. Labor issues,
Animal welfare,
all of transportation, their carbon footprint, their what score is it? What's ESG scores, and so many of them have this mentality. They have a mature business, and they've seen a lot over the life cycle of that business. And they literally, I feel like they just have the mindset that we're just going to keep our head down. Don't say anything about anything. Like don't have an opinion about anything, and try to just weather whatever storm it is, and just keep producing pork chops and getting them, they don't want to do anything different than they've always done.
They don't want to stir the pot.
And that's going to hurt them. That's going to hurt them.
They think it's a trend.
Yes.
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 I think, yeah, and
Is it?
I don't think
I don't think it is. I don't think
I mean,
social
I don't
media
think
is
it is
going
either.
away.
But I mean, on the animal agriculture side, I mean, I think it's an even more important question than it is on
I
the
think
produce
there's
production side.
I think there's a shift, and I think it's here to stay, and probably is going to become more so. And I think that's going to be a huge problem for them. The longer they go, that they don't address it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I mean, that's what we think about. That's what we sit down and we always ask the question with each other. It's like, why doesn't Triumph Foods or somebody come to us and say, hey, you guys are doing this, it's great, but I think it's just the head down mentality. I think they don't
I would buy
realize.
a pack of bacon with my face on the back of it.
Yeah, it's got to be worth twice as much, right?
Yeah. Give a little shock value. You talked a little bit about immigration. Do you have any tips for farmers out there that are wanting to do the visa program, bringing immigrants in to do work? What's some advice you can give to those farmers that are looking to get into that?
You'll find some great folks. It looks like it's more expensive. Generally, from a productivity and a work ethic standpoint, it's a break even, right? So you're going to get as you might be paying 25% more. For example, where we are in Oregon, our minimum wage presently is $12.50 an hour. Our H2A, because it's based on AWAR, is $17.41 an hour. Plus, we have to provide housing and the transportation and their permitting to get here.
Yep.
So we're probably $21 an hour by the time we're done. It's not any more expensive to bring those guys at those numbers than to pay somebody $12.50 an hour, at least with the current environment of those that are working on the farm. And so that's, a lot of people look at that and they feel like it's too expensive. It's really about the same. Yeah. There's some headaches that are bigger, but there's also some huge advantages to knowing that the guy's going to show up. Their house is just down the road. It's on the farm probably because it's your house and they're going to be there.
Yep.
And they're just, a lot of the time they're harder workers and just more consistent.
What do you do to keep them happy? Because that's a huge thing. If I'm understanding right, what I've looked into is if they're not happy and satisfied, they can go back.
They can go back.
So how do you keep them?
Well, it's not that hard to keep them happy. First of all, everything that you're providing is significant. The financial reward for them, and a lot of people don't know this, even within the industry. These guys are making as much as a MD in Mexico is making. Yep. They're making very, very, very good money. And in 2 or 3 years, they can completely change the entire trajectory for themselves and their family. And so they want to be here and they want to be able to come back. And so they're motivated to do the work that they need to. And I don't, like any worker, you want to have the right conditions for them and the right opportunities. But the opportunity for them is they can't even go get a job and work 40, 50 hours a week if they wanted in their home country a lot of the time. And if they did do that, they would make literally 1/10 to 1/20 of what they're going to make, on your farm. So that's not a struggle.
I think another, in the swine industry, one of the biggest advantages that we've realized is you don't realize how much value there is to when you bring a person here and you train them for that job and that you're going to have them to do that job for a set amount of time. In the company that we feed for, the amount of time that was spent revolving door, hire somebody, they're there 2 weeks and they quit. They're there a month and they quit. It is significant to have that consistency, to know that you're going to have somebody there doing that job for X period of time. And that all goes into that, what that real cost is. It's a lot more efficient.
Do you think the government really truly wants to solve immigration, or do you think that it's just a talking point for them to run on?
Both sides.
Both sides.
No. Oh, yeah,
Either way.
absolutely. This isn't a one side or a one party issue. This has been kicked down the road by both parties for at least 2 decades. The Farm Worker Modernization Act is back on the table, being discussed right now.
Explain what that is for
the Farm Worker Modernization Act is some improvements on the H2A program. So what it's going to do that's important for like the dairy industry is it allows workers to come as part of agriculture for year-round businesses. Like dairy's operating all the time. You guys are operating all the time. It allows you to be an ag worker in those industries because it's within agriculture. Because for some reason, the H-2A visa is connected with temporary, less than 9-month needs on a farming operation for people to come. So they want to change that. That's one significant change. The other one is a path to citizenship for those that have been in the United States working in agriculture for a defined period of time. The initial definition was for the last 3 years as a minimum. They've toyed around with 10. I don't know what the final, resolution will be, but there is a requirement for you to have been and to continue working in agriculture. And if you do so, you have the ability to, and frankly, the requirement to get a green card so that you pulled into the system legally. And then the other piece about it that is the regulatory side is once that's done, because it's a pretty good fit. So you get the ag workers, you get the people that are working in agriculture, which in the dairy industry is 80 to 90%, I think is the number. I don't know if it's 80 or 90, but it's very high. Undocumented workers that are working in the dairy industry. That's because they can't get H-2A workers, so they pull those in. But then still 70, 80% of ag workers in general, pickers and packers and, people working in the fields, a high percentage of them are undocumented. So the idea is, okay, let's get them registered and documented in some form. And then the third step, the regulatory side is, okay, now that that's done, now all employers are truly required to do an E-Verify. So you can't employ someone if they don't have documentation to prove that they're in the country legally. And right now there's loopholes galore on an E-Verify. You don't have to do it. And frankly, if we did do it, we wouldn't have food to eat in the country anyway. So that's where the Republicans can get on that side. The Democrats and a lot of the Republicans, frankly, are excited about the ability to give people that have been here for a lengthy period of time a path to citizenship.
Yes.
What's mucked everything up politically is the number of people crossing the southern border has just totally messed that up. Because before, the previous two administrations, really even to the second half of the Bush administration all the way through Trump, the numbers of and people crossing were pretty low. It was, manageable versus what it is today. So then there was the ability, the willingness to accept this, and now that's what's mucked up the waters is the sheer chaos at the border.
Yeah.
Presently,
it just is. It boggles my mind, because, and this is personal experience, but the people that are here on ag visas, those are exactly the kind of people that you want to give a path to become a citizen of this country, because they're the hardest working, they're here for a reason. That's exactly what we want. And I just could never understand why the process is not similar, because we had several in my time working for the people we grow for. There are so many people that we had that were trying to become citizens, but the amount of money that it takes and the time that it takes, it's just not. It's insanity. It should be much more streamlined.
And frankly, it's almost impossible for those that have come illegally to get there. There's ways for it to happen, but why were they here? I mean, you think about the previous administrations on both parties. The border was not as open as it is today, but open, right? Yeah. You could come, and we need those people, and that's why they're here. As much as farmers, we get criticized for hiring them. The reason they're here is because we need them, and the government knows that we need them.
Right.
So in one way or another, they make it possible to get the people, but then they don't solve the problem. It seems not solving immigration is just a perfect example of how broken our system is. And I don't mean to get all political on your podcast here, but I've heard you guys get a little political, but it's garbage because it's something that could be answered and resolved. And it's just proof of like the polarization of politics and
dividing
the dividing when the common ground is like, I mean, sometimes there's like a razor thin line of common ground in the middle, right? This thing's like freaking...
Yeah, you can have a picnic on this.
Yeah, it's a 10-lane freeway, like it's huge, but we still can't seem to get it done.
Yeah.
Hopefully we will.
Yeah.
Do you think immigration will help? Do you think it's like the savior to helping this huge labor problem long term? Or do you think we're going to have to, like, what do you think is going to be the thing that solves labor? Or do you think it's always going to be constantly an issue?
It has to be technology, because my another BHAG, right? I like throwing those out there, but one of my, I want to write a book about my working title is how we get the opposite of what we vote for. The American consumer continues to want us to pay higher wages. They want us to give better benefits. And I'm in one of the best states as an example, right? We increase minimum wage from $9.25 to $12.50, and then it's attached to cost of living, so it goes up every single year. We have a mandatory 1 week paid time off. We have a mandatory retirement match of 3%, so you have to do a 401k. We have a what's the new one that we have is a mandatory paid family leave, 3 months. You have to maintain the person's employment. We have all of these things that people are voting for on a federal and a state level. Some states are worse than others. The regulatory pressure that we're getting from every angle is not going to allow farmers to continue to do what they do from a labor standpoint. Technology is the only way forward. That, or moving your production to another country. And that's happening on a massive level presently. And that's the only two options that I see for for vegetable production.
How long, logistic wise, how long does it take to get let's say, watermelon or onion from your farm to the packer, to the grocery store, to the actual shelf that people shop on to buy an onion or a watermelon? Like, how long does that process take?
Yeah, I mean, the planning process is going to start 18 to 24 months in advance. From the time, though, that we'll plant an onion. I'm going to use onions, so I'm not doing multiple commodities.
Yeah.
But we're going to plan the rotation, 2 years in advance. When we finally do plant that seed, it'll happen in April. That onion will get harvested in mid-September on average. And that onion can ship from September all the way through May, because we'll take those onions, harvest them, put them in storage, and then pull them out as we need them. So from storage into the packing facility is a day, right? We'll come out of the storage. So let's say we harvest it in September. We pull that onion out in May, just to make this as the longest duration of time as possible. We'll run it to the packing shed. It'll ship that day, and then 4 days to the distribution center and another 2 days to the store. So once it leaves the packing shed, it should be in the consumer's hands within 7 days, roughly.
And does that change depending on the commodity? Does it change depending on if it's a watermelon or an onion?
But really, the only thing that changes, the most significant thing that changes, is the way that it's harvested and the way that it's packed and that duration of time. So, for example, asparagus is only going to be like 72 hours old by the time you get it. Maybe it's a week old tops by the time you've got it at the grocery store, because we're going to harvest it, bring it in, pack it, and ship it all within about 3 days. And then it just depends on the distribution process there. Watermelon, similar. We're picking those watermelon, bringing them directly to the packing shed, and then straight out the door to the distribution center. So the only difference between that and onions is just the fact that we can store onions for a decent amount of time and pull them out as we need them.
I feel like the uncertainty is one of the toughest parts of being a farmer today, because, you're trying to plan, we're thinking about the crop that we're going to plant next year, but we're also thinking about generations coming into the business, or depending on your financials, how you're going to maintain where you are, let alone try to grow that. What is your biggest challenge when you look forward for your own operation to make it viable for the next generation?
Politics. I mean, I can dive into that, but I mean, really, it's politics. I think politics or regulation. It's one of the two, and regulation is a result of politics. But exactly. We can figure out how to get this stuff done, but not if it really doesn't even make sense anymore. And I don't know if you guys ever read Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
I don't know what chapter we're in Atlas Shrugged, but I feel like, that's the world we're living in, and where the disconnect continues, or the gap between reality and
what the world is actually like.
Yes, is getting just broader and broader. And so it just gets, I don't know how hard I mean, I'm only 42, but sometimes I feel so freaking exhausted. I'm like, this is not worth it. Like you get the payroll audit, and then you get the OSHA audit, and then you do 13 food safety audits, and then you have some troll on the internet tell you that you're a slave driver because you're employing workers from Mexico and you're putting them in free housing. And you're like, this may not be worth it. And I hope when I say this, that the people that are listening to you, that those that aren't farmers understand this. This is, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but like I could either scream or cry sitting here right now because that's how true it is. It is overwhelming. It's already risky. We're already in a super, super volatile business. We already work on super thin margins. We all have to borrow a ton of money. And at the same time, you want to make our job harder and harder and harder. And then on top of that, you want to tell us that we suck and that we're ruining the environment and that we don't care about our workers and that we don't care about anything. Yeah. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And I just want to be like, forget it. You guys figure out how to feed yourselves. I know how to feed myself. Right. I know how to live. You guys figure it out.
I think that conversation and that thought is going on across not only agriculture, so many industries. I think agriculture, it's more acute just because of the amount. It's so capital intensive, and it intertwines so many government agencies depending on what you do. But and it goes back to that disconnect with the consumer because we are so removed from agriculture as a society that we're blessed as a society in this country in the fact that you were able to go to a job and make enough money at that job to feed your family and to pay your house payment and do everything that you have to do.
There's always food in the grocery store for you to buy.
But you don't have to worry a whole lot. People have the luxury of working for an employer, and there isn't near the career employment as there used to be. In other words, the idea, my parents' generation, there was a heck of a lot of people that you got a job working for whatever. You worked at the concrete plant, you worked at the car plant, you worked here, you worked there, and that's where you worked, and your whole life. And that's not the case today. So there's not near as much of an investment on the individual's side as far as I feel like a lot of people go home and they don't give a second thought as to whether or not that business is going to be in business tomorrow.
That's a great observation because I've never even thought about that fact that like people just roll from job to job to job or industry to industry to industry or whatever, and they don't have, they're not invested in it at all. They don't.
They just got their blinders on.
If you worked for Ford your whole life and Ford goes bankrupt, you're not going to get your pension, right? So you actually you're going to vote in a way that supports that industry or whatever else. That's pretty profound, actually.
And so when you go back to our industry, I just feel like it's so hard. I think that goes back to when you said you started and you're 3 inches off the ground, you have to go to 30,000 feet because I feel like it's foreign to people, the emotional investment that we have as farmers, because this isn't a job where, so my home is where my farm is. It's not my livelihood. It's everything, it's my identity.
It's every day.
My identity is this. Mm-hmm. And it's not as simple as saying, okay, well, this isn't working anymore.
Time to
go
pack
do something
up.
Else.
Yep.
Because yes, if it gets bad enough, that's what we'll have to do. But you're so invested that it's just a tough, it's a tough spot. And I don't know whether there's enough people, as you look forward, I don't know if there's enough people out there that are going to be willing to carry that torch as this regulation gets harder and harder.
Well, and that's another reason why this is so important, because I love the idea of advocating because it also teaches consumers, how we do things, and that's good. But it also sparks interest in young kids to maybe want to get in agriculture. Yeah. One video might spark a kid's interest to be like, man, I want to explore that. Because, you know, back when you were a kid, everybody and their dog was an FFA, and you know that was just the thing. But now it's really not that way anymore. And the way that culture works is what's popular on social media kind of sets the culture and what young kids do with their lives and what they want to do. And I feel like this kind of stuff is really important in that aspect, to not only teach people but also recruit people to come work in ag.
The hardest thing though is that, I mean, as part of that, I can't even imagine, not that it doesn't happen, and maybe the swine industry is a little different. There is no way is a slight exaggeration, but it'd be almost impossible if I had wanted to start doing what I'm doing on my own, because there'd be no way to scale it. No way. So that's the piece that I think the layman doesn't understand, or someone outside the industry doesn't understand. You get frustrated sometimes that these are multi-generational businesses, but it's really the only way that it works, because you're talking about so much to invest and so little return that's the only way that it operates. It's like the same argument when people, you know, you had to have heard the subsidy argument. Okay, well, it's not us who sees, I mean, do the farmers see some of the advantages from the subsidy? Yes, but we still just try and outcompete each other and put each other out of business. And so we really don't capitalize on that investment. All we do is do it more cheaply and then pass that savings on to the consumer ultimately. Like the consumer, as much as that subsidy is there, it'd be really interesting. I've never seen a study on it, but I'm sure that the consumer benefits probably more so than the farmers do, because of the
competition.
Because of the competition, we all have to compete, and so it's not like, I mean, I'd love the idea of saying, hey, we're all going to get together and it's going to be $12 corn,
right?
But we don't do that, and people would freak out if we did do that. But it's okay if you know, if somebody's building a widget and you've got an iPhone, it's okay if they make 1,000%.
Yep.
Nobody has a problem with that. But when, I don't know if you guys run into that too, but it's like, it's always, well, you shouldn't be making that kind of profit.
Yeah. Farmers shouldn't make money.
Farmers shouldn't make money.
Yeah, I've seen that argument.
Okay. But you see that. And I don't know, part of it is I think it's generational. So they think it's just generational wealth. You don't really earn it, or you didn't really deserve it. You just inherited it.
Yep.
So therefore,
I think that's the biggest one.
Is that the biggest one?
I see that a lot.
Yep.
People are so critical about inheritance. If you inherited anything, everything in your life's been given.
It's privilege.
Yeah. That's huge in culture nowadays, unfortunately.
I tell people all the time that if you woke up tomorrow and you had won the largest lottery that known to man, and you said, I think I want to be in the top 10 pork producers in the United States, and money was no object, you would give up long before the money ran out. Like you would probably just break down and cry, because
you'd just be like, what's the point?
Yeah.
The same conversation that we're having right now.
I don't think people realize that it's all of our businesses. You truly have to live it, to have that desire in you, because otherwise it's just not worth it.
Yeah. You got to have the passion, and I think the legacy really helps. And that it takes a special person to want to farm.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's almost your bred. Like, I wouldn't have the desire to be a farmer unless I saw my grandpa and you work as much as you guys worked and operated on thin margins and did all these things. It breeds you to be that kind of person and wanting to do it. So I don't know. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer by any means. I think there's a lot of good things. I think, you know, farming is amazing for the world. And I think a lot of people appreciate farmers, but you just guys, we're trying to show you guys our perspective on what we live day to day. And in Shay's case, he's living the same thing that we're living over here on the livestock side. You know, it's kind of a labor, regulation, immigration, all these things are problems, not only in just one industry in agriculture, but the entire industry. And we have to solve these issues for us to be able to continue on. Unless you want Bill Gates to own everything, or, you know, elitists to own everything and be consolidated and have no family aspect. I don't want that in my food system, and I hope you guys don't either.
Well, at the end of the day, it really is, it's national security. If you really want to back out, I mean, food is a national security. Do we want our food raised here, or do we want to rely on a supply chain to get it here from wherever? And do you want your choices to be fewer, or do you want your choices to be more? Because consolidation is the natural progression. As things get tougher, scale helps that. But then as you scale, you make decisions as to, okay, am I going to grow 8 things that 5 of them are marginally profitable, or am I going to concentrate on 3 things that I can manage and that are the most profitable? Well, if I'm a large integrated company, I'm probably going to focus on those 3. And then as a result, the next thing you know, you have less choice as a consumer, and that's not what anybody wants. So it's a tough deal, and it's something that we need to solve, but it's not going to get solved easy, and it may not get solved in my lifetime. But it's something worth fighting for, so we'll all keep at it.
Yeah, and I think that, we're like, what's the solution? What's the solution? Well, the solution is when the government regulates the shit out of us, and then all these family farms go out of business, and there's famine.
It really is. Like, I feel like it's got to hit the fan. It really does, and that's the scary part.
Yeah, then everybody's going to wake up and go, what happened? Yeah. And how do we get our food system
Just
back?
whether they wake up in time or not.
Yeah, so we're going to try to get people to wake up a little earlier than that, hopefully.
And this isn't woe is me. Like, we're not sitting here telling you that this is like we hate the industry, or obviously we love the industry, or that feel bad for us. What we're saying is let us have a fair fight.
Yeah.
And that's what we're missing out on, is this we're getting to a point where it's not a fair fight anymore, which is why the consolidation could happen, which is why our food could be coming from somewhere else, is because we're getting beat up.
When the deck gets stacked against you, it's at some point you just get tired of trying to fight the fight. What do you do for fun?
Well, I combine play and fun when I'm flying the airplane. I always loved that. In fact, that came from my grandfather. He flew a Cessna 210 and would just tell me stories about flying all over. And his adventures, they'd go for a week, or like to get the group together and they'd fly to Mexico for like a week, kind of like adventures that I wouldn't even consider today. So he gave me that bug. I like to ski when there's snow, at least. And I hate fishing, but my kids love it. So I spend a fair amount of time, on the river with the kids fishing.
So what do you fly?
I have a Cirrus SR-22.
Okay.
It's a low wing. People will know what it is, the one with the parachute. So
oh, nice.
Typically that's what I do. And I would have, the weather was nasty here. You guys had a lot of thunderstorms. Otherwise I would have flown out here. It's about as far as I go, about 1,000 miles from home. It's kind of the maximum distance that I'll fly. But for me, it's nice because I'm really mission driven in anything that I do anyway. And aviation's really cool that way. Like, I got to get here for this. And you've got the challenges of air traffic and weather and everything else. It's a constantly challenging thing. And it's just cool. It's just cool to get up there and kind of set your own agenda to some extent.
What's your dream location to fly to? You said you only fly 1,000 miles, but if you could fly anywhere in the world, where would you want to fly to?
There's a jungle strip that I have. There's a picture actually under the glass on my desk of a jungle strip that my grandfather flew into in the 70s. In fact, I have a picture with him standing on the runway when we went back there like 20 years later. That's kind of on my list. I'd like to do that one trip, and it's not as scary. And at least from a spatial orientation standpoint, from the GPS and all the components that are on the airplane, it's easy to do it. It's more like the cartels and stuff like that scare me.
Yeah. Would you recreate the picture? Would you try to take a picture?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Not only the picture, but hopefully though that there's not guys standing there with guns or something when I land trying to confiscate the airplane for a drug run or something like that.
So did your grandpa teach you how to fly? Like, how did you learn?
Unfortunately, they had in the it was the late 80s. They had to sell the airplane. The bank called the loan, and they had to sell. They liquidated everything they had. So I flew in the airplane. But that was one of those things that they had to get rid of. And some rental property, a bunch of stuff they had to sell to pay off their line when the bank called the note.
Sparked your interest, and they just took it away. So you've been just hunting for it ever since. Now you finally got it.
My dad said that he flew in a war situation, but he said that he said it was almost therapeutic. He said the time that he spent coming back from a mission were some of the clearest thinking that he'd ever done. He said and I think he never flew. He flew commercial just one or two times in the years after he got out. But I think that the time that he spent in the cockpit of a P-51, probably some of his best memories. I think the way he talked about it.
That's some rare air he was breathing doing that too.
Yeah.
In a lot and a lot of ways.
So he was stationed in Lucena, Italy, and they had a 51 that they stripped all the armor out of, and they put a jump seat in it, and they would fly like down to Naples if some army dignitary or somebody came and they were coming doing a tour, they would go pick them up. And he said that every time that happened, that somebody needed to go pick somebody up from Naples, it was practically a fist fight, because that thing had zip, because they'd taken the guns out of it and all the armor out of it. So he said you felt like it was really and it would maneuver so much better that they just loved it.
We got two more questions and we'll wrap it up. But most satisfying crop to grow out of everything that you grow, what's the most satisfying?
Recently, I'm gonna give watermelon that, actually. We've grown so many crops that are hard to sell. People think, okay, that's another thing they don't understand. Like, oh, well, if you grow the crop, you can sell it. Now, I mean, it's different when it's a commodity. When you're talking about produce, there's no you don't have a contract, you don't have a customer, you don't have anything that's guaranteed. And we tried sweet potatoes, and they were so hard to sell. We'd harvest them, put them away in storage, and then just trickle them out the door. And the watermelons just come in and go out, and come in and go out, and come in and go out. And we've been fairly successful growing a good crop, a product that people like. And that's been fun. That's been fun because you sell loads and loads and loads.
I guess I have two more questions after this one. I just thought about it, and it was kind of going back to what we were talking about. We're not trying to be Debbie Downers and everything like that, but farmers got to find that edge. We got to find that edge now. We're in a state now where doing this is our edge. Doing social media, it's our edge. Yes, it's great to promote agriculture in a positive light, and that's our mission, but we're also doing it, personal gain comes second. Yeah, right. And we're trying to do everything. That's our goal here on our farm, is to make it viable for my kids, the seventh generation. And I'm in other things as well. I'm working on a thing behind the scenes that's going to be coming out here in next month that I'm excited about. But also I do real estate investment with my brother. Is there anything that you're doing to find that edge that's maybe on farm, off farm, because we're in this weird state. So is there anything that you're doing to diversify that you're comfortable sharing?
I should be doing a lot more to diversify than what I am. I'm always looking to follow the verticals a little bit more. So the peeling that we do with the onions, right? So we had all this byproduct that couldn't be used, and so that was kind of one of those, I don't know if you want to call it epiphany. It was, that wasn't like, something that is that diversified, but it is taking something that is unusable otherwise, right? Essentially we got 2 cents a pound for it and we get 20 now. But outside of agriculture, same thing. We have some rental properties and some stuff like that. I wish I had done in hindsight, especially because I'm in the Boise market, right? Watching what's happened there. Yeah. I should have done a lot more. But I think hindsight's always 20/20. But that's what I think I'm going to have to be more involved in, is just rental properties in general. You can always do ag land, but I'm already tied to that. So yeah, the diversification for me is in rental properties.
Sweet. Okay. Last question. You got anything else you want to throw in? Last question. If all your social media disappeared tomorrow and you God forbid, but you passed away and this was the only video left on the internet of Shay Myers, what message, what couple things, 3 things would you want to leave with the consumers, the people out there? What would you want to leave? What message would you want to leave?
The consumers or your audience?
How about both? And I know this is a hard question, so take your time. Take your time.
Pull that out?
I was just thinking, we got kind of deep.
I think a couple of things. Number one, it's important that anyone doing anything that's contributing at all have confidence in themselves. I'm just getting old enough. I'm 42, right? Like, I wish I had believed in myself a lot more, a lot sooner, because I'd be a lot farther than where I am today. And there's just so many things that tell you, no, you can't do this, or no, that won't work, or no this, or no that. And a lot of the time I feel like your intuition combined with your work ethic and just your willingness to do things will make a lot of things happen. I mean, you guys are on social media, so you know this. 90% of the battle is making the content. It's not what's in the content. It's not even what you say in the content. It's just doing something. So that's something that I want people to know. Confide in yourself. And then the other thing is, I hope that I could be a source of honest perspective on what agriculture is. I try really hard, and I mean, from the politics of agriculture to the family dynamics of agriculture to, you know, the logistics of agriculture, that has really turned into my goal. I just want people to know and understand what we do and why we do it and what it means to them. And if they get those, they understand those things, we'll all be in a better place, because they won't be frustrated that we make a profit sometimes. They won't be frustrated that we use water. They won't be frustrated that we use fertilizer. They'll know that we're doing what we're doing for the right reason, to try and feed them, to try and make a living, and to try and create an opportunity for the future, for my family on our farming operation, but also for them and their kids, so that they can work that city job and have something to eat too.
That's well put.
Very well put. Well, we really appreciate it, Shay. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for making the drive all the way down here to Iowa. I know you're a busy guy. He's got a keynote. Go follow Shay on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. He's even got a YouTube. Go follow him. He dropped a lot of knowledge on this one, a lot of fire. So we really appreciate all of you listening or watching. We'll be back here next Friday, and make sure to pay the fee, share the show, and we'll see you guys later.